Hello and welcome back to the Double One Radio Gamescast. As always, I'm your host Ryan, and I'm joined today by my lovely co-hosts Brett,
Hello.
Alex,
Hello.
and Wyatt.
Hi.
And today we're going to be talking about some Horde mode shooters, PvE multiplayer, all the things that we usually don't talk about. And by usually don't, I mean we've maybe talked about Destiny a lot, but not really anything else. So now it's time for us to touch on the other things and Destiny again.
Oh boy.
It will never
You
die.
You
Here
should
it comes.
you should have that as the official title. It's like co-op games and Destiny again.
All right, it's episode number 81. We're chugging along, and there's some things that happened in the gaming landscape this week. You guys know that?
Yes.
I
Sometimes
didn't.
they happen.
I live under a rock.
Oh, that's unfortunate. So
I'm busy drawing maps, okay?
there's a little known game that I like to sometimes recommend called Final Fantasy XIV Online.
Oh dear God.
Which has a free trial that's critically acclaimed and includes the award-winning expansion Heaven's Ward up to level 60. That game is now the most profitable Final Fantasy game.
Why haven't you told us about this before, Ryan? What's with all the secrecy?
Well, because it just happened. It was this week. We learned
Oh
that
no,
this
no.
week.
Why have you never mentioned this game before?
Well, I have.
Oh, whoa, God! I think I just got like a telepathic message from the future. Asmongold? Does
New
anybody
World?
know what that means?
Okay.
New World?
Okay.
Gold. Huh?
So now it has surpassed 24 million players, which is a big number. That's a big number. It's not paying players, that's active accounts. So it's a different metric, but it is still the most profitable Final Fantasy that has ever been made.
Yeah.
And that's an achievement. And they're stating that they're basically increasing the budget for 14 going forward because of how profitable it's become.
Ooh.
So they're
sense,
putting more
yeah.
resources behind it. Which is
Oh,
crazy
yeah.
because the expansion that's about to come out next month is the end of like the last 8-year story arc. And they're going to be starting a new one. So I am excited to see what the next stuff looks like.
Exactly how crazy is it about to be?
Dude, I just want voice acting for more of it. That's my one gripe with it. Because like the voice acting that's there in the expansions is really good, but they're just like whole quest lines that don't have voice acting, and it makes me real sad.
We've talked about like a tiny bit. We've talked about, I think, voice acting to some regard before, especially with Japanese games. Do we really want the Final Fantasy laugh to be something in here?
Dude,
I don't think that would be a thing.
it
anymore,
wouldn't happen
to be
because
honest with you.
14's British voice cast is incredible.
Oh,
Like so 14 switches voice like I don't know the proper term for it, but voice centers that are essentially coordinating all the voice actors from an American company to a British company right when the first expansion released. And the swap is like jarring for a little bit, but the British voice actors do a phenomenal job with everything. It gives it way more character.
Huh.
You also
Nice.
get to see your Xenoblade people again, which is nice. Love that cast. All right, so that happened. We got some other news in the Fallout 3 sphere.
Oh.
So Fallout 3 has just received an update.
Oh my.
They have
Wow,
removed
just before
the Games for Windows Live requirement.
wow,
so you
just
can now
before
play Fallout
Skyrim
3
gets
again.
its update.
Before what?
Just before Skyrim gets its update. Instead
Skyrim
of,
gets its
you
update,
know,
which makes the Creation
new
Club
game.
content part of the base game.
Instead of a new game
For
from Bethesda,
for
that
a
would
lot
be
of money.
nice.
I think. I don't know. It might be cheaper if you own it already. I'm not sure. I haven't really followed any of the Skyrim news, but I don't know. We'll talk about that when it comes out, but that's not till next month, so.
And I have things to say about it then.
That'll probably be a good, like, Elder Scrolls retrospective episode. But we've got some other stuff. So there was that update, which is really nice because now Fallout 3 is a lot easier to get playing again. So infamously, Games for Windows Live kind of went down a few years ago and basically made a fair few games that used to have it integrated completely break. There have been ways to get around it for a long time, but they're always a huge pain and not super reliable. So now it's great to know that we can just go load up Fallout 3 and play it. Especially because Fallout 3 is a good Fallout game. That's a very fun game. So I'm glad to see that that's back. All right. So I don't know if you guys follow the sports ball at all.
The sports ball. Which sports ball?
The
Is the one that
football
you
soccer
kick?
sports ball.
Oh,
Or the one that
no,
you hit
not-
with a stick.
The one that you
not
kick,
that one.
right?
I
So-
like the one that you hit with net.
EA has apparently been in a disagreement with FIFA
Yes.
for a little
Yes.
I
while.
heard about this.
And FIFA has supposedly, rumoredly asked for $1 billion for the use of the FIFA brand. And EA's just been like, no, because why would you ever agree to that?
Yeah.
I think the important thing to add here that a lot of people don't know is the FIFA disagreement here is just over the FIFA branding. They can still use all the players because they have a separate agreement with a different association for the usage of the players.
Oh God.
So, literally, the only thing this agreement is over is the name of the game, essentially, and the branding in the page that like gets people that like to watch FIFA into the game. I mean, there's no competitors to FIFA, so
No. Yeah.
they really don't need the name. Like, this seems just to me like a bad move from FIFA, if this is fully true, because obviously we don't have a ton of information about this. But
We could have an entire podcast or two about all the things I hate about the FIFA Association.
I mean, this is just one of those things that it strikes me as weird, because there is no way that FIFA games make that much money on a regular basis, right? They make a ton of money, but like $1 billion is not a small amount, right? That's not an amount of money that most games ever make. So it just seems like a very
I mean-
strange decision.
But do the sports ball people even remotely seem like they know anything about video games? Besides
Probably
like-
not.
It's like in Austin Powers when they go back in time and Dr. Evil asks for like $300 trillion and everyone just laughs at him because like that amount of money isn't even real yet or something.
Yeah.
It just kind of feels like that. It's very out of touch and weird and unrealistic.
I wonder because when I read that
It's FIFA.
bit of news for the first time, I was wondering I wonder if FIFA is like kind of as like a I wonder if they understand that
Old,
like people are
out of
really
its
upset.
time?
Well, I wonder if they understand that like players are really upset about how EA handles their sports games, and so they're like, no, screw you. We're just gonna like
I
jack
doubt
up
it.
the price. But
Yeah.
again, and I feel like they'd be too out of touch to really like know
Too
what's going
corrupt.
on.
And even then, it's hard to throw blame around for that because we don't know if that's EA executives, if that's maybe executives that are managing the brand deals that need to pay for the licensing fees. Like, I don't know who is responsible for that process of decision making, and I don't think we ever will until we get like retrospectives from people that are retired. But as of now, we don't really know who's behind that, so it's hard to make that call. Okay, so Call of Duty Vanguard has been advertising their anti-cheat called Ricochet. So this anti-cheat was advertised a little under a week ago. And then within 3 days, their kernel driver got leaked, and the devs of some very well-known cheat software are already working on reverse engineering it. This is right after they released
so
like an
pathetic.
advertisement touting how good their anti-cheat was.
Yeah.
It just makes me sad.
I don't really feel like
So
there's
weird.
like much you can comment on. I feel like every joke you could possibly make is just within those couple of sentences you just said. Like I don't even know what to add to it.
Oh, 'cause
to be
I
honest.
learned-
It writes
Yeah.
itself.
I learned when I
Yeah.
was looking at this that there used to be an advertisement for Call of Duty, I think it was for Warzone, where Activision just published like a video with a black screen and white text that said, "We've just busted like 1,000 cheaters" or something. And then it played a video of a cheater reacting to getting banned.
Yeah.
And then ended on
Yeah.
like happy music and then more text saying, "We see you." I just feel like when you do this, people that make cheats are going to take it as a challenge.
Exactly.
You've just
And
turned it into a competition.
It's like those
Exactly.
war on drug commercials.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. and because it's not like, oh, my livelihood is getting threatened, I better do something about this. It's like, oh my god, that's hilarious. I would love to be the person that just spits in these guys' faces with their stupid little ad campaign. It's never like, oh man, I'm real scared now, because there's
Well,
no reason for them to be,
I'm
because in 3
shaking.
days
Well, it's
they
really
get the
it's really
source
funny
code.
too. It's really funny too that they're the ones touting like, yeah, we're banning cheaters left and right. It's like your game. If Warzone is famous for anything, it's how often you just run into cheaters during a game.
Yeah.
Like during one day. Like it's really
It's
sad.
It's because they turned it into a competition, so now they're the people that get focused on. It's such a strange decision-making process. And I have to wonder, has anyone ever thought, I'm gonna buy Warzone because they have a better anti-cheat? And I'm like, no, if I want to go play a first-person shooter, I'm just going to go play a first-person shooter. I'm not going to look for which one has the best anti-cheat, right?
Exactly, yeah. The only thing that comes close is like, yeah, I'm not going to play the multiplayer for World at War because that game came out in like 1897, and everyone and their mom is flying around with.
It came
like,
out before
finger
World War
guns.
II even came out. Even
Yeah.
was a thing. Came out. God.
Okay, so our next bit, Nintendo Online is getting an expansion pack.
Oh god.
I think we briefly mentioned this before after the Direct, but now we know the pricing. And it is
Oh, boy.
more than double
Oh
the price
my
of the base
god.
version. So for one person, it is $50 US, and for a family plan, it is $80 US.
Yep. For all those like the only 7 N64 games that hold up.
I feel like when you're charging this much for it, you really have to have a large library, right? You have to have something
Yeah.
rivaling like the PS Plus collection or something.
Or
they
you
just
have
don't.
to have what PlayStation Plus and Xbox Live Gold does, where they offer you free games, free current
The
games.
point is, they got to do something, right? Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
something.
No,
You
they
can't
will
do
offer a
this.
service with nothing behind it. That seems perfectly reasonable.
it's such a strange decision, because I feel like if this was $20 cheaper over the board, like it was adding on half the price of the base plan, nobody would have complained, right? Like, nobody would have had a problem. But now they've just had so much negative publicity because of this one decision. So I don't think Nintendo's going to walk it back. I don't think anyone here probably thinks they're going to walk it back, because
No.
Nintendo
They ever
is,
walked anything back?
like, once or twice, but it's never really been about prices. I think they've only walked things back when like a game was bad or something. But I've never seen them walk back a pricing decision, so I would highly doubt that this is going to change. But I don't think they're going to see the amount of attachment rate they want with this, because that is a big price, especially because the
The
Switch is
one
a
thing-
secondary console for a lot of people, and the online gameplay offerings on the Switch are not that many. You've got like Splatoon and Smash.
Yeah.
The one thing that this online service had going for it is that it was significantly cheaper than every other.
It still
option out
is,
there.
because the regular plan is staying the same. So regular plan is still the same price. It's only if you want this expansion pack.
Right, but I mean, I feel like most hardcore Nintendo fans are going to do it anyway. But again, like that was one of the benefits of it, is that you got all of these online features at a very, very low price compared to everything else, and now it just
It's just a strange decision.
yeah.
I don't know. I think we'll see what people think of this as we get closer to it officially launching. But it is, at first glance, just a very strange set of decisions. All right. So who here has ever heard of League of Legends?
I want to leave.
Raises,
It's been a
raised
great
his
show, but I
hand.
think I'm gonna I'm gonna head out now.
Now, who here has heard League of Legends is extremely toxic?
Oh yeah.
Oh, is it? Never
So-
heard of such-
so
It's more
Riot's-
dangerous than standing point blank to a nuclear bomb.
Riot's new response to combat toxicity is they are removing all chat from the game.
Mm-hmm.
And importantly,
Yeah.
this all chat is already opt-in. All right. So I used to play League like 6 years ago at this
I'm
point,
sorry.
and back
There's
then it
people who
was
were
just always on.
banned by it.
There wasn't like there was a mute all, but you couldn't turn the chat off. Then they made it opt-in instead of opt-out. Now they are just removing all chat. And I think the thing most people know is like all chat ever since they've changed it to opt-in is very rarely toxic. It's almost always just jokes because who's going to go flip that slider to yell at people that probably don't have the slider flipped, right? So now it's just people making jokes and now it's just getting removed. My thought process on this is that it's just being removed so there's a highly visible thing that they look like they're putting effort in to combat toxicity. When like this is gonna do very little.
and we've talked about this before, like the toxicity in online games kind of stems from very core design decisions much more than just the chat existing.
It encourages the players to be awful to each other.
I mean, it's not even that it encourages. League just has this system where one bad person is almost always dramatically worse than one good person on your team is.
Yeah.
So you're incentivized to really just get mad at people that are bad because they're probably the reason you're losing. And that also builds this complex that people have where they think they aren't bad. And so they just blame everyone else on their team, and that cycles into toxicity.
The thing is that they're attacking an outlet for like the kind of toxic behavior that you find. They're not targeting like the toxic behavior itself. Like they're not hitting the source of it, if that makes sense. And that's really where you're gonna find progress. And it's not, attacking how they can like express their toxicity. It's more about you got to hit it right. You got to hit the nail on the head. You can't hit it next to it. That analogy didn't make any sense, but hopefully you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I do.
Okay. So we've gone through our main news, unless anyone else has something they want to add in. Nope, great.
No.
All right, moving on.
I'd really rather not talk about League.
Well, we already did. It's time to play a game. Is everyone ready to play a game?
No.
So you are a new Nintendo executive in this situation.
I'm scared.
And you are tasked with making Nintendo Switch Online profitable, but worth the price. At the price it's currently at, which is rivaling PS Plus and Game Pass, essentially. So what do you do to make Nintendo Switch Online the gold standard?
Yikes.
You got a lot of options here.
That's a tall order.
So, and I correct me if it already has something like this, but you know how because the current Nintendo Online plans, they already give you like part of why the thing that they expect you to pay double price for like the updated one is because now you get the N64 games, right?
Yeah, you get
N64,
N64
you have the library of them,
and GBA, I believe, or not GBA,
and then,
but GB Game Boy.
Well, there's a Sega Genesis one as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
there is that also. So, and those are all already like included, just bundled, and you don't have to pay anything extra for them, right?
Well, you have to pay for the pack for that. So this expansion pack cost adds in the Nintendo Switch Online, Genesis and N64. We don't get GBA yet. That was wrong. Genesis and N64. Plus, it also includes the new expansion for Animal Crossing.
Well, that's neither here nor there.
Wait, is this like expansion, or is this just new season content update?
It's a DLC expansion.
Oh, huh.
For one game.
Very excited about it.
That you already have to have paid $60 for.
I haven't played Animal Crossing in so long.
Exactly. So it's weird, but I'm gonna go with something that I enjoy from Xbox Live, the now dwindling experience of getting you know how like months will go by and like every half month you'll get like a little cycle of games that they give to you for free that are like not on Game Pass or are just like in the backwards compatibility section or something, and you just like, hey, they're free, and if you grab them now, you just have them forever. Even I think even if your subscription ends, you still have the games. I don't think they're tied. Like you just need like a network connection to be able to play them. I think that sort of thing with games that aren't in those passes that are already included, and kind of newer titles that have come out that maybe not like super new. Like you could probably get away with like putting something like Breath of the Wild in there because that was a launch title. It's been a bit. And having that cycle of just like, okay, you have like you can there's like the positive of doing things that are free for a little bit and then they go back to costing money is that they're free for a little bit and you just have them forever when it's done. It's not like the normal Nintendo way where they're purchasable for a little bit and then they just get deleted from the mainframe.
Wasn't that the thing with the Mario collection or something along those lines?
Yeah, exactly. So having a cycle like that of like every month, maybe every half month or something, of just having like 3 games, because I think Xbox has 3. Where just like you have like a nice spread from like old to new, and then you just get them for free for a little bit if you have this subscription that you're paying so much extra money for. I don't think that would fix all of it, but that's something that I really like from
Give it more
Xbox.
value.
And I think exactly, yeah, it would give it so much more value, and you get people to play more of the slightly older games that aren't in.
Especially if you tossed in
passes
some
as well.
games like Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games or something. The games that a lot of people won't buy,
Yeah. Or
or
indies
if they
too,
want them, they already
even.
have it. Yeah, indies. So, all right, what are some other ideas?
I have 2. So one of them is pretty simple. I don't think they offer this, but things like PlayStation Plus will they'll be like, okay, like you get a special PS Plus discount on these games if you own the service. So even if you're buying a single player game or whatever, you get this discount. And I think that would be a pretty like good way to add some value to it. But I was also thinking if they really wanted to do something unique and especially for a console and really like go out there, like integrate Discord into like online chats and stuff. So if you're playing a multi-platform like a cross-platform game, you can talk with Discord and it's integrated into like the Switch's OS and everything. And so it'll be a really easy way for you to talk to people because whatever Nintendo comes up with, it's probably going to suck. So they should probably just integrate with
Yeah.
something else. And
Just
so I think
outsource it.
right. And so I think Discord integration, especially for a console, is like a pretty interesting, like unique idea. And again, it makes it a lot easier to play with your cross-platform.
I believe that
buddies.
I think PS5 is doing it, aren't they? They're
Yeah,
getting
'cause
Are
Sony
they?
partnered
Oh,
with
that's right. I
Discord.
forgot about that. Well, still, you know,
What PS5 is doing.
All right. So what's either Alex or the next idea, Wyatt? If it's rapid fire.
Oh no, that my first idea was just like
Okay, so
online,
they were bundled
like,
together. All right.
sales.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, Alex, what have you got?
So I was thinking about a couple of things, and then I realized I'm horrible at marketing, and that's why I'm not trying to be a producer. I was thinking, maybe like themed seasons of content, being like with the Castlevania expansions. Maybe not having 2 or 3 of the good games, and then everything else that's obscure and bad. Maybe having the good games in there. Just like highlight an entire series of games.
That'd be fun. You get like, especially if they're retro franchises, get like a themed Pokemon thing where you get like Pokemon Yellow.
Yeah.
And a couple of like the original Game Boy Pokemon games, and you have that as like the monthly treat, essentially.
Yeah. Though I think
Hey.
unfortunately that could be pretty that could put some people off if there's like a couple seasons in a row where there's just nothing that really interests them genre wise.
Yeah.
But that was my idea because I thought it would be cool.
Play on those people that want the nostalgia factor.
Yeah.
Good
And then
marketing
You would
here.
also,
Milk
if
it.
you had one of those for
Milk
Metroid,
it like
you
a
get
dead
rid of all the
horse.
people that think that Dread isn't worth $60.
Oh my god, Dread's incredible. So
It's so fun.
Dread is a really
Even just
good game.
watching people play it, I am so scared. It lives up to its name.
Proper Halloween Metroid.
It's
All
so
right.
good.
So now that we've talked about Halloween Metroid, it's time to talk about our main topic for the episode, which is PvE content in multiplayer settings. So think games like newly released Back 4 Blood, Left 4 Dead, the old school style. You've got games like Destiny, which do a different style of PvE. It's not quite Horde mode, but mission-based multiplayer. Essentially, any game that is online multiplayer that really tries to sell you on a PvE experience and not a PvP experience, excluding MMOs, because we've talked about MMOs before.
I was gonna say, because one of the things that I didn't see on the list that we were talking, or when we were first coming up with this, was well, it doesn't apply now because it's much more of the battle royale PvP. But the original Fortnite, that was a multiplayer.
The save the world thing.
Yeah.
Yep, Save the World fits on that. I mean, it was originally a Horde mode shooter that still there, just kind of forgotten
exists.
about.
It exists.
It's a novelty at this point.
It's isn't that cute sort of thing.
Yeah. But I think really the best way to start this is let's get the Destiny out of the way. Because
Thank God.
that way I can time box it in a way that makes sense.
It's
Thank
probably
God.
best for my sanity as well.
I no longer
Thank
need
you,
a
I'll-
therapist.
I'll need a limit.
All right. So, Alex, we've talked about Destiny on this show before. We've
have
talked a
that.
lot about all of the decisions they've made. We haven't actually talked much about the game. Surprisingly, because I went back and looked, we tend to talk about Destiny when we're talking about them removing content, which of course they're still doing because they're removing one of the good expansions from the game. But
Yeah. But it's free
Don't
starting
start.
December 7th.
Just don't start. Just keep going.
Yeah,
Just keep
no,
going.
not decisions. Not decisions, actual game. Not
Well,
decisions, actual game.
so the reason I bring that up, Alex, is because when thinking about how specifically these PvE shooters keep players around, and that's kind of the main theme for this, is how do you, as like a game that is meant to have either a live service or a season pass or something, or just long-term engagement, maybe with some cosmetic microtransactions, how do you keep people playing this game if they aren't driven by competition, right? So with Destiny, there's a couple things. You've got your story, you've got the gameplay that is generally like very solid Bungie style shooting, which you can't find in most games.
The gunplay feels phenomenal, and I like the story has faltered sometimes. I will say it's very. It might not be good at some points. It's interesting to follow, and you want to buy.
It's interesting enough to make you want to come back to see what the next crazy idea they have.
Yeah. And then there's also just the horrible thing that comes with games that are live service things that have season passes. FOMO.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that is the most dreaded phrase. So I don't know about you all, but I've hit a point with FOMO where if a game has FOMO mechanics, I tend to just stop playing it at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
I'm
if they're
not
bad.
smart enough to come to that realization yet. Pray for me.
I have been. Don't you worry. I have.
And like I accept small FOMO, but like that is really what I think killed Destiny for me, because I go back and play Destiny like once every 3 months for like a day. I play it for a little bit, and then I just can't get into the new thing because a lot of my stuff's just either gone or can't remember the old stuff. It's this crazy situation where like the game just kind of doesn't feel like it's accepting to newcomers anymore in a way that Destiny kind of always was the game where you'd point to compared to Warframe and be like, well, Warframe's got a terrible new player experience and Destiny's got a good one. So
It's not that way anymore. They added a timeline to fill you in on all the stuff that they've taken away. Like, okay, here's what happened in the Red War. You weren't part of that. Now you're a new light if you're coming in.
That's so weird.
Things like that. But then it's still, if you come into it in like this season, that's right before a new yearly expansion. You're like, who's this crow fella? And it doesn't give you any of that explanation. It's just very vague story outlines in their new timeline, which is it's not explained in game. It's a little tab that you can go into in the game that has little written descriptions of what happened.
Such
before.
a cheesy way to do
So
it. Like that.
it's poor. Not decisions. Not decisions. Ugh. Oh god.
I was
It's
gonna
almost
say that
impossible
stuff.
not to talk about it.
That stuff only works if you were there. Like that's like a helpful thing in like some Pokemon games or like
Like
Metal
a
Gear.
refresher, not
Yeah,
a
Exactly. Like, oh,
reminder.
you haven't played in like 3 days or something, and so here's like just a quick like 2 paragraph sum up of like the last things that you did. Like, oh, okay, now I remember. Now I remember where I was. I'm not here because I have a thing to do in this town. I was just here because I was grinding, or I'm here at the beginning of the tank hangar in Shadow Moses because I'm running back and forth like an idiot and left because I didn't want to do it anymore and then I forgot where I was. It doesn't work. Like if Ryan,
Yeah.
say you were playing Metal Gear Solid and you did that. You were just like, okay, I'm halfway through disc 1. Okay. And I'm done and I'm gonna here Wyatt. Pick up the controller and play it. I haven't played it for 3 days, but just read the sum up. I'm gonna go like to the store or something. I'll be back in like 45 minutes. You'll understand what's happening. Like no, that doesn't work
Yeah.
ever. That's dumb. That's stupid. You can't rely on that, especially if it's just as short as like something like the Metal Gear one is. It doesn't work.
You know what I'm wildly gonna do to you, Brett? So I mostly agree with you
Yeah.
for this, but I want to play devil's advocate for a minute because we don't normally do that on this podcast. But
Okay.
Brett, you are
Hit
known
me.
to like wrestling,
Yes.
and wrestling is very much a thing that you cannot really watch from the beginning, right?
No. You can.
You can't do that. So you have to get in at some point and just like pick a point in time and go, right?
Yes.
That's kind of the way most people get into it. Now, for video games, I think that can work, right? Like, I think you can have certain franchises where you're like,
There-
pick a point in time, play it, and go. But that's usually in franchises
there-
that have self-contained stories.
And there,
Yes.
there are points in time that you can pick, but you
Yeah,
also
that's-
can't if it's a season that's gone.
Exactly.
That's
That's the thing.
past.
You can choose to play Halo 1 and 2 if you want to, or if not, you can just play Halo 3 and you'll probably be fine. And I will contest that statement, Ryan, with also the fact that I would not have gotten into wrestling or understood what the hell was going on if I didn't have friends assisting the storytelling, being like, oh, that's why this match is so dramatic because these two guys, their story goes back like even before we started watching, and that's why this is so important. That I go, oh, okay, that makes
Well,
sense.
and I remember the one time I watched wrestling with you guys after an episode, right? Basically, the entire time of me watching, I was just asking questions. I was like, "Who are these people? What the hell's going on? Like, what?" And thank God I had you guys there to explain to me, what the story was in that particular fight and like why it was such a special fight to watch for wrestling fans. But if I didn't have you guys, I would watch it and be like, "Yeah, this looks like wrestling," and then just move on with
You don't
my
get
day.
the story behind it, and you just kind of go,
Exactly.
"This is two
yeah.
meaty men hitting each other. What's the
Yeah,
the hook
this is
here?"
two. This is two. No, it was four because it was like a.
Yeah, it was a
It was
four-way.
four.
I think.
It was four oiled up gentlemen just slapping each other, and I was like, yeah, whatever.
Poor oiled up gentlemen. I
any other
love that.
in any other circumstance, I would have been like, okay, wrestling, not for me, whatever. But I had you guys there to explain like what was going on and why it was such a special fight again for wrestling fans, and going back to Destiny for a second too. One thing that I've been trying to figure out like how to describe it, and I don't know if it's like this anymore, but one of the reasons I stopped playing was because I was always someone that wanted to get into the story and like the larger universe and everything, but I didn't care even though I wanted to. But it always had this weird thing where it would tell you what you're doing in the immediate moment, like what's your mission and why you're doing it, but it always did such a poor job of describing what it means for the larger story that's going on.
Yeah,
Right?
I find that too. It's the missions are self-contained in a very strange way.
Yeah, and also I'll play devil's advocate for myself here. So I mentioned that about wrestling, and I think Brett is right that you kind of have to have someone get you into it. But once you have someone get you into it, you are able to go back and look at like one of the earlier matches and be like, "Oh, I see the storyline link between this." And now
So
with
That's
Destiny,
if
you
want
can't
to,
do
right?
that.
That's not. Yeah.
And
Well,
I think
that's just-
that to me is just what really makes it hard to get a new player to play that game because you can't tell them, "Oh, you can go see this really cool set of storylines that like
Exactly.
maybe they're not incredible stories, but they're really fun to play through." Because I think the Forsaken campaign was like legitimately very fun to play.
Yeah.
So
And it's we're in the point where the next thing coming in February, the next yearly expansion, is the midpoint of a trilogy. So that would be, like introducing someone to Lord of the Rings in the oh no. I don't remember the name of the second movie. Two Towers.
yeah, Two Towers.
Good job.
That would be like watching the Two Towers first and then holding the Fellowship of the Ring in your hand and then snapping the DVD saying figure it out.
It's true.
Yeah. And again, because it does such a poor job of like it'll say
Or
like, okay, this is Zavala, this is the bald blue man that you go to talk to about this thing. This is the
token straight character.
exactly.
And I do want to mention
Yeah.
that I think one of the reasons why we're focusing so much on the story for how you get new players in Destiny is because Destiny's loot game and stuff like that isn't as good as other games out there. That
No.
might be a controversial statement, but
I'd like to do more on that, but two things. I wouldn't disagree with you, but I also haven't played enough looter shooters.
I mean, like,
would
I think the
say,
simplest
to have a
comparison
better
is
opinion.
Borderlands, and Borderlands is a franchise that,
Mm.
like, Borderlands 3's story is a dumpster fire, but the game is really fun to play. So
Yeah.
it's still got a dedicated player base that plays the game constantly because it's fun to play.
It's a game that because it doesn't have to concern itself with like PvP and all this other stuff, it can have kind of wildly unbalanced guns and just have fun with it because
Yeah,
it's a
there's
single player game with co-op. There's no like
there's
competitive element to it.
there's so many things with Destiny about being both PvE and PvP that people get in a tizzy about this, people get their underwear in a twist about that. It's it's so hard to have a fun gun that's okay, yeah, this is really fun to use in PvE. It makes me feel like what the Guardian is supposed to feel like, a god slaying badass. And
Yeah.
then in PvP, it's just like, ooh, yeah, you're killing people a little bit too quickly because enough people were complaining. And by enough people, we mean the vocal minority. You're no longer
Streamers,
going to
yeah.
be able to use that gun at all. It's going to be complete garbage. You might as well dismantle it.
Yeah, that's what gets me because, like, so my example of this is there's a gun in Destiny called the Prometheus Lens, which is like my
Oh,
favorite exotic, I think, because
Catalyst is still broken after 3 years.
it shoots out a laser beam, and the longer you hold the trigger down and are shooting something, it gets this like miniature sun that expands and burns things to bits. That's really cool, right? But there's this problem with the design where weapons like that are really good at a certain level of early content, right? They're good for the campaigns where there's tons of hordes of enemies. As soon as you start hitting the like dungeons and stuff like that, you run into this issue where that gun goes through ammo really quickly. It doesn't do enough damage to anything with half a health bar.
Yep.
And it's terrible in PvP. Like real terrible. So you never want to use it because it constantly got nerfed because of PvP. So now it's a bad gun. And you run into this issue where all the really good guns in Destinies are exotics with boring things, right? Like I think the most
Or
useful
just any
exotica.
hand cannon,
Yeah, it's
because
just a hand
it's
cannon.
broken. Weapon design is broken in that one aspect.
Whereas like with
Hand cannons
Borderlands, you
are
can get a
always
gun that shoots out, and then every time
other
you hit
guns.
something with the gun, it's like a second gun spawns and flits around your head and shoots something different, right? And that's just a cool, unique thing that I want to use, even if it's maybe not the best option, because it's really fun. Whereas in
Well, and
Destiny, you have to chase the meta to do a lot of content. So
also every not like touching briefly on variety, every gun in Borderlands feels like it's an exotic.
yes,
Whereas I've been trying to grind for a specific Jurassic Green pulse rifle in the most recent event. I've gotten the same roll out of 20 or so different perk combinations 7 times in a row.
yeah.
In Borderlands, you have a gun that when it's empty, it turns into a bomb and scuttles to the closest enemy.
Basically, I think what Alex and I are saying is Destiny could improve its like playability so much if they just had a different philosophy for how to handle PvE balance versus PvP balance.
Yeah, just have separate have separate weapon
Do what
adjustments.
World of Warcraft has done for 15 years that has kept that PvP community alive. Because like say what you will about World of Warcraft, but the PvP for that game has been active and like well renowned for over a decade. And the reason is because they balance it separately. So you can still have your crazy items in the base game, and then PvP can kind of exist on its own, right?
Mhm.
Whereas then you get stuff like Destiny, which just doesn't. I don't know if it's they're not willing to put the effort in, or if.
It's
Go ahead, Alex. Yeah.
it's it's another issue because enemy NPCs and like ads and mobs and things like that. They have it's just also an entire different health system for how their HP is handled compared to the Guardian. Like you'll see maybe a crit on one weapon will do 5,000 some damage on a trash mob to the head, and then you do it on a Guardian, 67. It's their calculations are so whack for that things. It's and you hear all this stuff about Destiny spaghetti code and things like that, but it's
I mean, you hear that about every game. I'm not gonna call Bungie out for that because
yeah.
you hear that about
There's
every game.
there's so many things where the players keep begging for there to be separate patches. Like, okay, yeah, you can nerf Vex Mythic Lust in PvP, but it's good to okay in you can nerf it in PvP. Don't touch it in PvE because then
It's
we're
unusable.
grinding. We're trying to clear Volta Glass 70 times without having
Because
it
the
drop.
amount of effort required to get that gun is no longer worth it. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
what's the point? And I think, Alex, you kind of just hit the nail on the head right there, midway through your sentence. You were talking about how like the spaghetti code is a thing, and I don't want to call it spaghetti code, but Destiny has an engine that is very old at this point. And they've talked before about how difficult it can be to add content and change old content with this engine. And they've said that is a constant pushing block, except what I have, and I've read almost every, or watched almost every, like, development log Bungie's put out, at least as of 3 months ago, because I went on a binge and just watched a whole bunch of them, because they're very interesting. And they often have very cool information, but one thing they almost never talk about is actually fixing the base problem. They talk about the engine as if it is a problem, and they just don't mention that, like, maybe we should spend some time fixing the engine.
It's trying to build something on top of a swamp.
Yeah, and ostensibly, content vaulting was supposed to be part of that issue, solving that issue, right? Except they had also said they were going to stop content vaulting, and then guess what we just learned last week? They're content vaulting again. So, what's the point?
I think they stopped sunsetting. I don't think they were talking about stopping content vaulting entirely.
Okay, yeah, you are right. It was sunsetting, but
Sunsetting is every season you are going to lose more and more of the game because there was just more content sometimes, and you will be left with nothing.
I still have to just be
new
like,
guns we give you.
why are we losing a legitimately very cool patrol zone and a very cool campaign to gain what?
And not to say that Destiny has like completely gotten away with vaulting, but imagine any other game just being like, yeah, we're gonna just actively take out content that we've had.
I think it is a
Fantasy
frogs
14 Online.
in boiling water thing, right? So Final Fantasy 14 Online destroyed their previous content, but that's because that content was terrible.
The reasons, quote unquote, that they were giving for vaulting the Tangled Shore specifically, and not the Dreaming City, which is also part of Forsaken, or besides raid necessities and things like that, is because, quote unquote, no one was in the Tangled Shore. No one was.
So give incentives for people to be there, right?
Exactly,
like this is the problem. This is the issue with Destiny's design philosophy. They're looking at these things and going, okay, players don't want to be here. This is like the World of Warcraft devs, or the Diablos devs talking about, oh, we can tell people have this much engagement by what activities they're doing, and if they do the activity more than the baseline amount of times, that means they're enjoying it. No.
It means we're grinding for something and you aren't giving it to us.
Well, and here's the thing too. And we'll talk about this when we talk about Back for Blood, but what they're really missing is something that really spices up an area or a mission, because they're asking you to do it over and over and over again, right? Back 4 Blood solves this issue by having the corruption card system, which can dramatically change the exact same level that maybe you just played 10 minutes ago. Because they do such a good job of like randomizing where loot is, randomizing what enemies you're gonna be fighting.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about Back 4 Blood in a moment.
What I'm saying is, Destiny, because it's asking you to play these missions and run around in these areas so much, they need something like that to keep people coming back, which they kind of had with the Dreaming City, sort of, which is why people really liked that area, and they really need to be pushing that more in their other zones as well.
They had, and I'm not going to agree that at points the Tangled Shore it's cool aesthetically. I don't want to go there as much as I can. So there's that bit that they're right about that, but it's also kind of their fault for not making me want to go there. Um, there is one lost sector, and it's from what I remember playing, the only lost sector like this in the game where it has unique enemy designs for it, and there's
Yeah.
like genuine,
Because I remember
really
like
interesting.
stumbling into that lost sector, and that was a moment for me, right?
Yeah,
Like that's one of the things I
the
think
empty
about
tank.
when I
The
remember
empty tank.
Destiny.
There's story behind it. There's a unique soundtrack where you only find the song in there now because Mercury's gone. You hear Paul McCartney singing "Hope for the Future," just like a song in the it's um and they're they have unique meshes. They have these little floating drones called shanks, and they have little like busboy tables on their heads with drinks and things. It's a hangout spot. It's the legitimate sort of like a very Star Wars cantina feeling place. It's
Yeah.
the only like little area like that that has that much feeling to it. I guess the other ones are mainly okay, hole in the ground with some unique assets.
All right. So I think for now we'll end our Destiny discussion there, because I do know we are eventually going to talk about Destiny again, right?
Oh,
it's
boy.
always going to happen.
Oh no,
because this
It
game is
has
a
to.
game as a service. It keeps going. And I'm sure we'll talk about it when the Witch Queen?
Witch
Right?
Queen.
Yeah, Witch Queen
And there's
releases.
also the 30th anniversary dropping in December.
Yeah, so
30th
we'll end up talking about Destiny again, but I think we just got a lot of the shared design problems out of the way
Mhm.
with it and other games like it that do the same thing where they look at the players and what they're doing and go, okay, our players aren't engaging with this piece of content or this zone, so we're just going to scrap the zone. We're not going to try to fix it, which can sometimes be the right call, but oftentimes it's far better just to take a hammer and nail to it and just try to fix the problem.
I mean,
put something there to draw players.
Final Fantasy XIV did what it did because a lot of that game was just so bad that it made sense.
Because
right?
every single issue,
unsalvageable.
everything in that game was bad when it first came out. Like there were
Right,
no systems worth saving.
It was a game that was completely unsalvageable. So nuking everything and starting over makes sense. The thing is that
But even then, they didn't do that, right? Like they kept working on the bad thing for a year and a half while working on the other project, so that people still had something to play, right? They had this attitude of we're gonna at least band-aid the problems here, so it can be at least baseline kind of fun, and then you're gonna get this really cool new thing in 2 years. So,
right.
But yeah, continue Wyatt.
But no, I mean, it made sense because it was pretty much unsalvageable,
Yeah.
right? But in Destiny's case, that's the problem, is that it constantly walks this line of like, it's competent, but also you're not doing anything interesting with it. Like you have a competent foundation, you're just not taking it in a direction that would really wow people. Like you can take the Tangled Shore as is and do some really interesting things with it. You can add on sections to it. You can do something interesting with the lost sectors. Like have Spider, one of my favorite NPCs,
Who's
in
going
that entire
away?
game.
Bye
Exactly.
bye.
Like there, because like he has such a great voice actor, he has such a great presence. Like the presentation of his area is great. There's so many cool things you can do with that area. They just instead of
And this
building
isn't even
off
bringing up like the
doing-
separate game preservation issues of now this content's just never going to be playable again.
Yeah, no, and like it's always been a franchise that you can build off of and do something interesting, but they'd rather just come out with a sequel or vault content and just not bother.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so frustrating, because
All
we
right.
never needed a sequel. But
So, moving on, we're going to move to the other new game that we've been playing recently and get Back 4 Blood out of the way, because I think Back 4 Blood is going to be fresh in a lot of people's minds, and a lot of people have easy access to it because it's on Game Pass, so you can play it and kind of see what we're talking about for yourself if you play it online or with, preferably not solo, because the solo mode's terrible. We can talk about how that game takes a lot of elements from stuff like action RPGs and adds them into the main game, and like deck builders to make replaying it interesting, which I think is such a great twist for a Left 4 Dead style horror shooter. where you're having to constantly like play the same levels over and over again with similar characters, but now you have new abilities, you have new attack methods, you have different weapons, you have different perks and abilities that change how you play your character. So
it made a lot of smart moves on how to take the Left 4 Dead genre like that genre and modernize it in a way that makes sense and doesn't and fits with the design really well. Like
yeah,
I
and it
think
also just doesn't shamelessly copy other things. It has some new ideas, which is refreshing to see.
Again, it takes ideas that make sense, like having a ping system in a game
And
like
ideas
that,
from other genres, which is very
right?
cool.
Like taking a ping system and just having that automatically, like, thank God, how has it taken this long for horde shooters to have a ping system? or the card system. Like at first, when you think a card system in a horde in a co-op shooter seems bizarre, but in practice it makes so much sense.
So an outline for people that haven't played this game, because I think there will be a fair number that haven't played Back 4 Blood. Maybe they're not interested in zombies or horde shooters, but they have a card system in the game where you start with a starting deck, and every checkpoint you hit in a level, you draw a new card. And these cards are things like 20% reload speed, or maybe you have a more unique one that's like you have a ton of bullet penetration, but you can't aim down sights.
You have double
interesting ones like that.
An interesting one that I've been using recently is you have double the amount of stamina. However, your stamina regeneration is a lot slower, but every kill, your stamina regeneration increases a little bit. And so if you can keep up the number of kills per second, you can get really quick stamina regeneration.
Encourages that like hyper aggression and a different play style from if you had the normal card.
Yeah, and then combine that with cards that will, increase your health by 1 or 2 points if you use a melee weapon, then you've got a really interesting build going with just 2 cards.
Does that like 1 or 2 health points make a difference?
It can.
Health is
they're
pretty.
Throwing...
You have like baseline, I think something around 90-ish to 100 health, depending on your character.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get cards generally add like 5 health increments.
But I mean, it's a co-op horde shooter, which means they're going to be sending countless zombies at you at any second. So it really does add up.
And you get a lot of cards. That's the other thing. You get a lot of them pretty quickly because I
think decks are 15 unique cards, and then if you get really late into a run and you run out of your 15, they'll give you just like basic health, stamina, ammo count boosts and that kind of thing.
Yeah, you get some choices of what to pick from. But yeah, the point is it creates a build where you draw cards in order as well. So if you have your 15 cards in your deck, your first 5 are the ones you get an option from at the start of a level. And then going on, you'll get an option from the 4 and then the next one. So you always have this like flow of cards that you have access to. So the strategy and even where you place that within your deck. So maybe at the start, I don't think I'm going to be strong enough to give up aiming down sights for that card, right? So I put a few accuracy boosts earlier, so then I can get those, and then I can pick that card up at the end to have really accurate hip firing, and basically not have to deal with the downside of it. So you have some really cool kind of build opportunities like that, which is very fun. And you get these cards by playing missions. You get supply points, which you use to buy these cards at a pretty good rate. Like I don't think Wyatt and I playing co-op have never felt like we aren't getting cards.
And the difficulty affects the amount of supply points you get. And because the other difficulties are tuned to absolute crap at the moment, we've been playing
way too hard.
It's ridiculous. We've been playing on the lowest difficulty, which yields the least amount of supply.
And we've had plenty
points. And it's been a really good, like, consistent rate because cards that you buy are anywhere from like, I want to say 25 to like 90 supply points. And
they're in from like 10 to 100 is I think the range I've seen.
Yeah. And I mean, you can get that easily with 2 or 3 runs, which will be, depending on the run, that can be, half an hour or something. So it's really not that bad.
Yeah, most of the missions in Back 4 Blood are about, I think, 15 minutes-ish, maybe less. Yeah. I think there's only been like 1 or 2 that we've played that's gone over that. Yeah, in general, it's got a really good progression system, and I think that's what's going to attract people to keep playing it, is card unlocks and experimenting with builds, because like there are people that have been playing Diablo 2 for over 20 years just because they can try different characters with different builds. Nothing about the game changes, but having that ability to try a different build and do a different move set adds some different gameplay. That if you enjoy the base gameplay, you now have a ton of replayability just from that.
The cards are going to be bringing people back. What isn't bringing people back if they don't improve it right away is cosmetics, because it is probably the most anemic cosmetics shop.
I haven't
I
even
have
bothered
ever
to
seen.
like change a single cosmetic, even
I
though I've
am
unlocked
not-
some, just because I don't care.
I am not kidding you when I tell you that the most amount of options you'll get for customizing your guns are like 2 or 3 skins, and that's it. Like,
It's like I
and
think of
all
Far
the
Cry, where I can go and change the ammo pattern, give different attachments and whatnot, and like
it's
create a
just
cool look for a gun. You can't really do that here.
it's just a flat skin, and there's probably like 2 or 3 options per gun, and then the skins that you get for your characters is so bizarre, because the ones that you unlock, except for like it's called like like a it's called SWAT, like it's supposed to be SWAT, but it has zombie at whatever. That one's kind of interesting, but literally everything else, like if you take Hoffman, who's kind of like a conspiracy theorist kind of character, he kind of has like a button-up shirt, and he's got a vest and like a boonie hat, and he's got this big like hiking backpack and everything. He's got a gas mask. Like, it's a pretty cool character design, but the skins you start unlocking for him is, oh, you give him just a button-up shirt and some khaki pants, and like those are the unlocks you get for him. Like, just the most boring like Ubisoft open world NPC clothing you could possibly imagine, and those are your unlocks for your.
And the weird thing is that like all the starter outfits are good enough to the point where they seem better than all the skins. So
yeah, there isn't a single like optional skin that you can unlock for a character that I like more than the base options, because the base option that they have for everyone I like quite a bit. It looks pretty cool. But yeah, that cosmetics is a big thing for a lot of people, and I think for most of us, cosmetics is pretty like important, and it is just not there right now. It's like shockingly anemic.
is like I think the thing most similar, oddly enough, Back 4 Blood's kind of attraction and progression system to get new players in and keep them there is most similar to action RPGs rather than shooters. And that you're really being encouraged to experiment with these builds. And action RPGs also have the secondary fallback system of loot, where you have your skill set, and then you also have the crazy loot that you can get that does cool things. Back 4 Blood doesn't have that, right? It has the mid-mission kind of like roguelike sense of you're progressing different versions of these characters with these decks and different missions, which I think will attract some of that roguelike crowd who enjoy playing the same game with different abilities over and over. But that's the same kind of attraction as the build system already does. So I'm curious if the game is going to end up needing a like secondary major thing to keep people playing it.
I think what's going to help out a lot with that is if they really are on their game about adding new cards and especially new weapons, and getting really wacky with adding new weapons. And I think as well, to keep people coming back. This isn't an issue. I've played through almost all of the acts at this point. The Act 4, which has only like 2 missions I haven't gotten through yet, just because I haven't been able to find a good match for it yet. But the problem is that right now there's this weird thing of oh my god,
it's really hard to get players in your matches.
Yes, thank you. I completely
And
lost what I was about
if
to
you
say.
do, you often have this issue where you're getting players that are differently geared. And the way this build system works is it's really designed around tailoring your character for a specific purpose, which is great when you're playing like Wyatt and I do, and you're talking to the other person. You can do 2 different builds, right?
Right.
As soon as you have random match-made multiplayer with no like role selection or anything, you run into the issue where you might get 3 people with the same build using the same gun, and none of you have enough ammo, none of you have the attachments you need, none of you have any unique role to fill. You're just kind of doing the same thing, and then you're probably going to fail the mission.
It's gotten to the point where if I'm not playing my like healer build, if I'm not playing my healer deck, we're like screwed essentially, because no one else really cares about healing others or like supporting the team in any way. So if I'm not playing the healer role at almost all times, we make like no progress because no one's working together.
I'm getting Battlefield flashbacks. I'm gonna have to ask you to stop.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing, honestly. It's less of an issue here because on the lower difficulty level, you can generally get through a mission as long as everyone does the bare minimum, which Wyatt has had trouble finding people to do. I haven't had the same bad luck you've had with matchmaking.
Oh do we want to talk about? Oh my god.
We'll save the matchmaking for when we inevitably do like a games club or something on this, but
it's way less common than it should be that I find a full match. Like I want to say 70% of the time I'm playing a game with at least one bot on the team.
It seems like the issue right now is it doesn't want to match you with people that are a different progression stage. So like the interesting way this game handles progression is that every run through the axe is a new run, is what they're called, where you pick a different character, you pick your starting deck, and then you do the missions in order and get sequentially stronger. And it seems like it only wants to match you with people at the same stage you're on if you're quick playing, which causes this problem where people don't have the same amount of gear, or you're waiting like 10 minutes for a player to join, or you're running with all bots that are not very good at the game. So that is like a problem that needs to be addressed because it is
it's kind of shocking
from the quality of the game.
It's kind of shocking how in a co-op horde shooter like this, it's been out for less than a week and it's struggling to find full matches. And that's probably not because of like a lack of a player base.
Well, no, it's not, because it's had some great player numbers.
So, no, it has. So that's that's why it's like whatever's going on behind the scenes is not it.
Yeah. I think otherwise, though, if the devs can get it together and have some good structures to keep players around, and most importantly, the biggest worry with Back 4 Blood right now is that it's made by the Evolve devs.
I was about to ask if it was the same team.
Nothing in the game right now really indicates that, from the horrible monetization that Evolve had.
However, they have said that any DLC pack post-launch will be paid. Which
isn't a problem if they're meaningful DLC, right?
If they aren't though, priced.
If they aren't, then we have an issue, and you also have the issue of you're splitting the player base now. So you might, if you release a map pack that has another act or something.
See, that's my thing. Is I so do not want like paid map packs and DLC or whatever to return, because I'm so done with multiplayer games splitting up their fan base, their player base.
And multiplayer games aren't.
It's not a moment in multiplayer gaming that I ever want to come back to again. And it's why, I mean, I don't like loot boxes and seasons and stuff as much as the next person, but I don't know. It's such a trade-off where I can't tell which one I hate more, where it's like aggressively monetized or it splits the player base. I don't know. It's It's a really tough.
It's also weird because this game is on Game Pass included, but it's also everywhere else a paid game. It's $40, so it doesn't have the expectations of a free-to-play game, which I think colors a lot of what Wyatt and I think about it, because we don't have a financial stake in this game like a lot of other games. So I am less inclined to be harsh on it because I'm just enjoying it in my free time, because I didn't have to specifically go out and pay for this game. I get it because I'm paying for Game Pass for all the other awesome games they have, and this is just like a bonus. So
and like Ryan, I haven't paid for it. Obviously, we both have it on Game Pass. But if for whatever reason it like was removed from Game Pass, or I quit my Game Pass subscription or whatever, I would buy it in a heartbeat. As is right now. I mean, before I even knew it was on Game Pass, I was gonna buy it. But yeah, I do think that's a good point in that we're enjoying it as people who haven't paid the full $60.
Because as of now, I don't think I'd agree with you. I would probably pick this up at like $20, but at $40, I'm the kind of person that doesn't get a ton of mileage out of multiplayer horde shooters to begin with if I'm on my own.
See, that's where we're very different.
Exactly. So like I don't mean that to be a knock at the game at all, but I think that's part of why it's done so well attracting players, is because you get people like me who maybe aren't usually fans of this type of game, But things like the card system draw you in. So you're like, oh, there's character builds. I like playing games that are character builds, and you can play with that, and then I get
we
this
haven't
cool
even
experience.
we haven't even mentioned it yet, but I mean the base gunplay is also really good. That
Yeah.
I mean that's the other reason that I'm still playing is that it's super crunchy and
And I
Where
think
that
it
might
the
feels
last
excellent.
thing I want to mention is the corruption cards that you were talking about earlier, because
Yes.
they are essentially modifiers that get placed on top of whatever act level you're doing, which do a great job of making it very replayable. So you might have a
If it didn't
modifier in
have
one
that,
mission that's like fog, to where you now have to like build around close quarters because you can't see past 20 feet, and it looks really cool because it's like the Silent Hill type dreary fog with light shafts coming through it. It looks great.
the other thing
And it's
too,
super
the other
tense.
thing the other thing too is that in most of these horde mode shooters, you can see lower left, like, okay, here's my team, here's their current health, here's what gear they have. So you can kind of coordinate something, right? In the fog, even if you can see their name tag on the screen, their information is blurred in the lower left. So you can't, you can't tell what state people are in. I don't even think you can tell if they're being like pinned down or something like that. So it does such a good
I
job
think they
of
start yelling if they're penned, so you still have like a cue for them being penned, but it's
right.
not as obvious
If it
as
didn't have,
before.
and it has other great ones too, like it'll introduce like, oh, here's the big like ogre boss that will show up every now and then, or here's a hag that will literally like eat up one of your players and then run
Oh,
away and try and separate you and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like it does such a good job of keeping every run different, and it does that classic sort of horde mode shooter Left 4 Dead thing where like guns that you may find in one run are going to be completely in different spots or just not there at all the next run, and copper, which is the currency, is going to be everywhere. So if it didn't do as good of a job of like mixing up each level as it does, I probably wouldn't be interested in buying it myself, but because it does such a good job of that,
Because it honestly like doesn't feel like you're playing the same level a lot of the time. If the modifiers
yeah.
are different enough, it really feels unique, which is very cool.
There, yeah, there's ones like if you there are doors where they trip an alarm and it calls a horde. So there's a card where almost every single optional door you run into will trip an alarm.
Which means you have to make
So
a decision of if you want
oh,
loot or if you want to make it through the level alive, which
or
is
there's
a
just
fun
some
decision.
doors. There are just some doors, whether they have alarms or not. There are just some doors that just don't exist in other runs. It's like, oh, here's a door
Yeah.
we can open up, and here's some stuff in it. Sometimes it's just not even there.
ah,
It does such a great
that's
job
funky.
of feeling very different. It's fantastic. That's the reason I would buy it with my own money, is because it does that so well.
All right. So we've done our Back for Blood talk. Brett, do you have a PvE multiplayer game you like to play that you want to talk about?
Well, I mean that's the thing, is that like this is I like parts of them, but I think overall as a genre, this is I have yet to find one that I constantly keep like going back to. I mean,
Remind me how many hours you have in Warframe, Brett.
well, it's been a while. That's
It has
that's
been,
why I'm
yeah.
not. It's been a couple of years for me. That's why I'm not jumping on it. I mean, as I'm speaking, I'm going to my Steam page, which is the place that I've played it a lot less. Um, just to see how many. Um, but I think just in general, I had just have like a couple things that I just kind of like touch a little bit, just to be like, ah, yes, memories, the neurons that fired before are firing for the first time in eons, and now the cobwebs are falling off. Wow. But I don't really have one that I keep going like back to all the time. But I think there's still ones that I really like, and it's just that they don't really do the same things that they used to anymore. And for me, that's definitely I'm one of those absolutely horrible um curmudgeonly people that only likes the original COD zombies from World at War. The second it got a little bit more complicated than that, I was like, this is stupid. Just give me literally just it amounts to just a cube in the middle of an open field, out of which you can just fire at just hitboxes that make the hit marker noise that make the number go higher on the side of the screen. But I really like that amount of satisfaction just has not been like matched for me. Like that, just like mowing down a mob there. Like I've tried the other things, man. Like even like Left 4 Dead 2 is absolutely super fun, but it's just I don't know. There's something about defending something from the Horde that's very different from like running from a Horde to get to a certain place, you know?
Yeah.
And that sort of like that sort of wave based thing where it's just like you sit there for like 20 rounds or whatever just to see how long you can stay there before you get completely overwhelmed. Like that is very satisfying. And then they started adding in all like the weird just like crazier stuff that I never really uh hooked onto too much.
The ridiculous lengths they make you go to unlock the Pack-a-Punch sometimes
Yeah.
is the stupidest thing.
Hmm.
Yeah. What I am curious about is I would love to see a AAA company take a whack at a like co-op roguelike that really emphasizes first-person shooter roguelike mechanics. Because there's a lot of indie ones.
I think that's what Rainbow Six Biohazard, whatever it is, tried to do. Contagion.
Extraction.
What's the new?
I believe it's
I think that's
Extraction.
what. I think that's the closest you're going to get with AAA.
No,
So
I
there are
am
some types
curious.
of games that I do believe only certain types of studios can make.
Because like Back 4 Blood has flashes of it. Back 4 Blood has flashes of that roguelike design philosophy.
yeah, it sounds like it.
Except it
Yeah,
never
the changing,
quite.
like the no doors. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where in Back 4 Blood you're kind of restricted in what you can do because of the zombie setting, and you want to stay realistic to like the horror movies and whatnot, and you can't get too crazy. Whereas something like take a Returnal and then build it out into this like AAA match-made co-op experience, I think that would be very, very interesting to see.
Yeah.
If that sometime it might happen, I could see some companies going for that, but it would be interesting to see. Because I think games like Gunfire Reborn and RoboQuest right now are doing really well as the kind of Borderlands loot fest roguelikes that give you a lot of good reasons to like really try out a ton of different weapons and do. They make that gameplay loop of finding cool guns and exotics and whatnot happen in a condensed like hour-long period, which is a great amount of time for people that want to do something co-op. So
Yeah.
I would love to see something like that made at some point with a budget that matches it, that is willing to
think
try new
that's-
ideas.
That's the thing. It's like the second that you put the roguelike genre tag on there, I feel like that like most AAA at least like on the producer side, I feel like there's just like a weird stigma against doing that in AAA. Like how many? I mean, you can count. Would you count Returnal? I'd count Returnal because the presentation is
It is a
very
roguelike, yeah.
AAA. It's definitely a roguelike. But like I don't know how many other AAA games are actually like truly roguelike like at all in that way. Like they just don't. It's such a weird thing that once you get higher up into the budgets, it's just like that genre is just avoided. It's like
Well, I think there's a
It's
legitimate reason, because it is the case where a lot of people that play a lot of roguelikes, like myself, tend to gravitate back to the same game because the genre is so highly replayable. Like I still play The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, which is a game for like that's 12 years old at this point and has gotten new content and whatnot, but that game is still great. And if I get the itch to play a roguelike, I often just go back to that, or like Enter the Gungeon, or something I've played a lot before, or like a modded Dark Souls run or something,
yeah.
that turns it into one. But I think that is kind of the scare factor there, is that it's hard to pull people away from the games they've already been playing. I think that's not necessarily true. The issue that's been happening before is just that a lot of roguelike attempts that are made are just not good. They don't understand what works about the genre.
And like how much
Go for it.
how much is Isaac often like super cheap? Like it's an
Isaac
old
is
game.
like sub
Like,
$10 all the time.
You get a new AAA roguelike game, it's gonna be AAA new price, which is usually
60
not.
or above.
Exactly, yeah.
Something that Ryan and I talk about too, because I'm getting more into the roguelike genre now, so I'm not super familiar with a lot of like the most famous examples like Isaac and stuff. But even with things like Returnal, they would take things from the roguelike genre that just didn't make any sense for that particular game.
Returnal takes a lot of mechanics specifically from Isaac that don't fit with Returnal. and then implements them not poorly, but in a way that isn't very fun.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, when I hit those points, I'm just like, this doesn't really fit with this game. Like a trap room like this is not something that works super well in Returnal, like it does in Isaac.
And that's even looking past how the gameplay feels very like arcadey, and it kind of clashes with its very like realistic. Look at how powerful our PS5 is, like graphics in its art style. Like even looking past that, there are just moments where I was like, wait, what? Why are we doing this? Why is this here?
Yeah, and I do think it is fair that like a game like Hades proves that roguelikes can be taken very seriously and have amazing commercial success even at a budget price point. So I think Hades is a roguelike that if people are taking something from roguelikes, especially in the AAA space, that is a roguelike to model yourself off of, not Isaac. Because I think the often obvious problem with things like Prey Mooncrash and whatnot that copy that Isaac formula is that it doesn't translate as well to 3D as it does in 2D.
Yeah.
And that's just the kind of thing where they look at this and they're like, okay, how can we make analogs for this? When in reality, the question that needs to be asked is like, how can we make a roguelike that captures that roguelike spirit in a different form?
Yeah.
So I think that's the issue that gets run into. But I would love to see a AAA game go after it.
Oh yeah, and AAA 2 has much more of a focus on like accessibility than anyone else, because it's trying to reach as wide of a market as possible. And so taking from Hades makes more sense too, because it's probably one of the most accessible, easy to get into roguelites that you're going to find. You know, it eases you into the mechanics really well, and it streamlines things here and there that just help newcomers out quite a bit.
Yeah. All right. So, any other games we want to mention? Do we want to do a Deep Rock debacle?
I would love to do it. I always love talking about Deep Rock.
Okay, so let's talk about Deep Rock quickly, because I think Deep Rock is one of the major indie successes in this space in the last few years.
And while it's like overall like really well made, I think the reason that it is as successful as it is that it's a game that you can play both casually and get really hardcore and like really get into it, and it doesn't feel like it's a detriment to either type of player. Like there are so many games where it's like, oh, if you want to play this game, you really have to like dedicate your entire life to it. It's like a second job, like Destiny, right? And playing it casually, you're just not getting the same kind of you're not getting nearly as much out of it as a result of that. And it's not a great game to play casually, where you just kind of dip in here and there. But I think Deep Rock does such a good job of like, hey, if you just want to play casually and you don't really want to handle, if you find assignments really annoying and you don't really want to do those from time to time, that's totally fine. If you really want to get hardcore about it, that's totally cool too. Like it strikes that balance so well.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because I think part of the Deep Rock success as well is just it's so visually distinct, and I think that often gets underestimated in how much of a draw that is for people. But Deep Rock's aesthetic is near perfect for the type of game it is, and it really captures that sense of being able to like mine through a corridor and open up different passageways, and the procedural generation that they use works really well, which is very rare. So you often don't run into problems where you can't find your objective or something.
I cannot describe to you how good the lighting is in this game. If you haven't seen it before, you just have to experience it for yourself, because it is probably one of the best uses of lighting that I've ever seen. And it's just gorgeous. Like the game would not look as good as it is without having the high quality of lighting that it does, honestly.
Yeah. I wonder, because I think one thing Deep Rock has struggled with is finding a player base that isn't already into the Horde mode shooter genre. And I think that's what the conversation continues to circle back to, is how do you get people that aren't into this genre into this genre? And the answer is probably to add things from the genres they like into these games.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's how do you do that in a way that isn't disruptive to the game, actually fits naturally. So I think that's a question that
are there-
developers doing these need to think about.
Are there ways to do it?
I mean, there are, right? Because I think Far Cry 3, this is a weird game to bring up, but Far Cry 3 is interesting because it's one of those original open world shooters that brought in RPG mechanics and skill trees and whatnot. And that worked extremely well, even though it was a new idea, or not a new idea, but an idea from a genre that had very rarely been used in that genre before. So I think you can do it right. You just need to
And now you
risk
can't
it.
escape it.
I mean, you can, because Far Cry 6 doesn't have skill trees. Probably to its detriment, but I think that's kind of a lesson that as long as you're careful with how you use it, you can totally get a lot of mileage out of different genre mechanics. Like Hades has elements of dating sims with gifting things to people and whatnot, and that works really well. So you certainly can take in these different elements and make them work for you. You just gotta do it with care and not throw a ton of things into the pot and have the issue that like Warframe has sometimes had this problem where they'll try a new thing that's like inspired by something else but not actually fully commit to it. And get this issue where something half-baked will come out that then needs to be, eventually it'll get to the point it should be, but usually it takes like a couple of months
A while.
to get that thing up to date. So
I think that's why Respawn's games do consistently well. Not only because they make like really high quality games, but also because they usually make a game that will mash like 5 or 6 different genres together.
Yeah.
And so it's very it appeals to a lot of different people from a lot of different genres, because they just like, all right, we're gonna take a bit of like Call of Duty's gunplay here, we're gonna take a bit of Mirror's Edge stuff here,
inject some hero
and
shooter abilities,
inject some hero shooters abilities. Oh yeah, let's just throw some giant mechs in there while we're at it. Why not? And they make a really like accessible game in the sense that it appeals to a lot of different genres all at the same time, and they blend it together so well.
Yeah. All right. So with that, I think we've hit the end of our discussions, unless there's other games people want to bring up. We've kind of run the gamut here.
I am
I just want to have a
exhausted.
shout out
from
to
talking
the
about
Halo
the-
Firefight, because I mean
Yes.
it's classic.
What's that?
It's Horde mode in Halo.
Oh,
There you go.
Yeah, it's a mode that's in most of the Halo games, or
It
just
started in ODST, and then people really
it's
liked
like ODST, Reach, and 4 and 5. I think
It's
have it.
not-
No,
not in
4 didn't
4.
have it.
4 didn't have
4
it.
It's not in
had
5 either.
I
4
thought 5 had it.
4 had Spartan Ops, which was
And which-
so much
Oh,
better.
that's what I'm mixing up. Yeah.
Which is basically a Destiny strike in a Halo game. This is
Ooh.
Yeah.
basically what they
A
are.
mediocre
Huh,
Destiny
how about that?
strike in a Halo game.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
reusing the maps, and there are like some cool encounters, but like the only one that I remember is a Rooster Teeth Easter egg. It's just audio from the Red vs. Blue episode, and that doesn't really count because it's not like 343 didn't make that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Halo 5 I don't think had it either. They just the closest thing they had was
Didn't they? Hold
the
on.
really big mode where you could shoot like ads and like bosses to gain
Oh.
points as well as killing players.
What's it called?
but that-
Warzone?
Wasn't
Wasn't
it
it actually
also
called-
called Warzone?
I think it was called
Was it?
Warzone.
Oh my goodness!
Well,
Oh
would
my
you-
It's come full
goodness
circle
gracious.
again.
well, would you look at that?
God.
Well, would you
But
look at
yeah.
the time?
I regret even bringing it up. Just end the show, Ryan. God.
But yeah, Firefight is a great example. That is like
Mhm.
a game mode that doesn't need to be eternal because it's attached to one of the like best competitive shooter franchises there is.
Yeah.
So, or not competitive, but like arena multiplayer competitive PvP type games. But yeah, let's go move on to shoutouts now. So, Brett, what is your shoutout that isn't Halo 5?
Oh. All right, I'm gonna. This
Aw.
this man doesn't need a shout out because he's already like probably a quadrillionaire or something. But my shout out goes to Tony Khan for being an absolute madman and giving us just like probably what's gonna go down as like top 3 matches of the year in AEW just for free on YouTube to watch whenever you want and to show
Oh, wow.
whoever you want forever. Like the next time that I
For
meet
anyone
someone
wondering,
that I-
it's Minoru Suzuki versus Brian Danielson.
Yes, which is something that people have wanted since the creation of the solar system. And now we finally have it for free. For free. You don't have to go to watchwrestling.in or like have watched it on like Timer or something, or have caught it on TV or something. Like, no, you can just get it wherever. It's on a pay-per-view. You don't have to pay money to download it. It's just there. And it's amazing. And I felt like I was stealing it because it was free.
That's wonderful.
It's great.
Wow.
All right.
I
I'm
got one.
gonna sneak in to the
Oh,
same shoutout
God.
section because I also have a wrestling shoutout. Because there was a match the other night in Dynamite with Dark Order versus Super Click, and that is one of the best like comedy-ish matches that I think I've ever seen.
Mhm.
Because the Dark Order is like a great faction. And for anyone wondering, the Dark Order has a dude in a mask that goes in streams on Twitch constantly.
Yes.
And just streams playing games called Evil Uno. It's fantastic. It's a goofy faction, but it's the kind of thing where like the fact that a show with such a goofy faction like them that's just made up of essentially jobbers who have come together as this cult family and do hilarious bits in the ring was incredible.
also aren't
especially when he took
Jobbers anymore.
They aren't jobbers anymore, but they were. He took a sock from someone else and then did the Mick Foley snake and shoved it in someone's mouth, and that was the best moment of this year.
It was very good.
Best moment. All right, who's next?
I'll go. I have a Back for Blood themed shout out because the game has completely overtaken my life. But there's you'll often find in the game that people will like spray paint things on the walls or like etch them in with a knife or whatever. And one of them is just a giant one. It just says "Blame Canada," and I'd like to think that that's a reference to an episode of South Park.
Oh.
If you know which episode I'm talking about,
the movie.
or the movie, right? Excuse me. Where it's this giant song and dance number about all the parents blaming Canada for their kids having like really bad language, and it's this whole like musical sequence, and it's fantastic. And I'd like to believe that it was a reference to that. So whoever put that in there, cheers.
All right, Alex, what have you got for us?
Shout out to my dice, who 2 sessions ago, my D20 for the entire time was not rolling above a 10, and now in the most recent session I've had, finally rolled above a 10. Good job on you. You're not going into the dice jail.
All right,
I like
with
how often
that,
happens too.
we have officially hit the end of the show. As always, Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m. Eastern on the podcast platform of your choice, YouTube and Twitch. Have a good day, everybody, and catch us all next week.
Bye-bye.
It's like the most coherent outro I've ever done for the show.
I know. This episode started with you saying you were so tired.
Well, sometimes tiredness breeds creativity, yeah?
Certain clarity has emerged from within the chaos.
As a game major, that's like kind of like your forces to be like, yeah, no, I'm tired, but that's a good thing.